Welcome to the XY Advisor Podcast, a global community of financial advisors sharing and learning with one another to drive the positive evolution of financial advice. To get involved, go to xyadvisor.com or simply download the XY Advisor app. This podcast series is brought to you by Morningstar, offering you technology and services to support your end-to-end financial advice process, including product research, investment data, and comprehensive financial planning technology through Advisor Logic. Advisor Logic offers you simple yet powerful tools to run your business, deliver holistic advice, and build trust with clients. You can experience an industry-leading digital advice offering. Simply select pre-built strategies, compare products, and generate your advice documents within a single guided workflow. Welcome back to this episode on innovation, brought to you by Morningstar, and we are covering off on the compliance side of things. All things compliance when it comes to technology and efficiencies. Welcome back, Phil Thompson.
Thanks, Jack. Oh, sorry, Fraser. Thanks, Fraser.
Thank you for hanging out and talking to us about all things efficiencies when it comes to technology. Today we're talking about compliance, one of our favourite topics, of course. You sort of left off in the last episode talking about the idea of, the software being beneficial for making less mistakes and certainly doing things that need to be done at the time frame when it needs to be done, and having that automation in place so that we're not relying on human beings. Tell us how how you see software in this process.
For me, software, I think I said in one of the other episodes, it really needs to do one of three things. It needs to help improve the client experience, help make me and my teams more efficient, or help us be more compliant. And so in the compliance area, it's a huge, huge thing for what we do. So, having easy access to data, if ASIC ever knock on our door, as per, one of the FASIA standards, whichever, I'm sure you know the number that I'm referring to, but the ability to get easy access to data. Well, if paper documents are in my filing cabinet, and then I need to scan that in, then that may not meet the FASIA standards. So that's one area of compliance where if we've got the data and it's all easily accessible to our systems, then if ASIC ever knock on my door, which they did for the LIF review, I had two of my SOAs reviewed. It took me half an hour to get it all ready and send it to the licensee. The second area of compliance is just accuracy of data. So that's an area of growth for me in my business, is how do we make sure we're not making mistakes with any of our SOAs, or just simple things like income being associated with the wrong person. We've had SOAs go out where we've actually done the wrong income because someone's just input some data wrong. Date of birth, within insurance, date of birth is, if you're 5 years younger or older, that has a massive impact on premium. So they're the kind of areas where having really well integrated software will reduce that human error.
Yep. And does it bringing data across so that the data entry, I guess, is that what you're referring to? The data entry not being incorrect here?
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. And I think, and as you mentioned too, that idea of proof, that, here is a file, here is the proof of everything that happened, when it happened, all those, timestamps along the way, all those sort of things that email, whether it's email or whether it's in your system.
Yeah, exactly. And just even because we are insurance only, so from a compliance point of view, we need to make sure that the clients understand that, and the clients agree to that, and the clients are happy with that, and the clients want insurance only advice and not full service advice. So from a compliance point of view, that's really important to us to make sure we've got all those checks and balances, that we can prove to ASIC that we're not just flogging insurance policies to anyone who wants, investment advice. We're tailoring our client experience to the clients and what their goals and objectives are. And so, we use software where we're very clear with our clients via the first phone call that we're insurance only, and just having a file note saying, I told the clients that we only do insurance and they're happy with that isn't good enough. So we also get them to sign a terms of engagement that says, I understand that it's insurance only advice. So all of those things, sign terms of engagement before we do any work, is really important.
Yep. And when you say signing, what sort of signing are you doing? Obviously not hard signature.
Yeah, electronic signing.
Yeah.
Via one of our software providers, signing off on the terms of engagement electronically.
And how do you see the concept of the data and the security data being sort of different now in this new world?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's super important that we are cautious. The benefit of having all the data in my filing cabinet is no one's coming and grabbing my filing cabinet. And so, that data is very secure. Having it all on the cloud and all provided electronically increases the likelihood that something's going to happen with that data. So it is super important. And again, it goes to that compliance, making sure that we are protecting our clients' data and it's not getting into the wrong hands. So that is a big area of focus for us, is to think about how do we house that data.
Yep. Are there any sort of other risks that you see in this process when it comes to, I guess, the compliance side? Or?
I mean, we're talking about financial planning. There's risk in everything we do.
Yeah.
It feels like we're walking on potholes every day. And so, I mean, there's plenty of risk there. Like the risk I see in my practice and the way I think about it is, yes, we get clients to sign off on a terms of engagement saying it's risk only, but signing an electronic document when paying a fee is very easy to sign off on that and turn around and 3 years later saying, oh, actually, I didn't know I was signing that. So there is always that risk of, the clients can sign something, but do they understand it? And not being there when they're signing it and re-communicating that when they're signing the original kind of terms of engagement increases that risk that they don't know what they're signing. They're just quickly signing off on it.
Now, I see. Obviously, when it comes to efficiencies, compliance has been over the last 10, 15 years a big cost on the business when you're doing it manually, and then when you think about some of the efficiencies that can take place with technology in this space, with regards to maybe things automatically saying yes, all these people have been sent that, all these people have been sent that. How do you see the idea of compliance or the cost of compliance maybe coming down or being more efficient using technology?
Yeah, I mean, an area of compliance that's very relevant in my world right now is with the 1st of October income protection changes. I'm sure this is coming out after that, but we are very cautious that we need to make sure clients are fully aware and that they're making an informed decision with their income protection, and they're not just rushing in just to get a policy in place. We also need to make sure that if clients don't go ahead, we've got the records that we followed them up multiple times with multiple ways of communicating, email messages, whereby they were followed up with. So for me, I can sleep at night going, well, a client's not going to come back to me in a month's time and say, hey, I've got this worse income protection policy, and if I claim in 10 years' time, I'm going to come and sue you, because I can show that I've got the records that we gave them enough notice and we followed them up enough times to then go, well, our hands are clean. If you choose not to go ahead, then that's okay, but it's not our fault.
Yep. Now, in a future world, the perfect scenario for technology and compliance, how do you see that panning out? To what sort of things do you see in this space, in the compliance space, that would be just like incredible for the most incredible outcome?
Oh, I mean, there's so many things like financial planning. We are so backwards in our way of doing business. We've got so much to move, and compliance does. My view is compliance isn't necessarily the one holding us back all the time. Like, our fear of actually moving can be the one holding us back, and we just kind of call it compliance because that's the easy excuse. So yes, compliance has a bit to move, but the future of advice is, super bright. Like, I think if we build in compliance into everything we do and think about, are we meeting the standards that we set ourselves and that, the regulators set for us, we can kind of bake that into every step of the process. And that's the way I think about it as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought. I think you're right there. I think a lot of the time, compliance is used as the excuse.
It's a financial planning boogeyman. It's so easy to blame compliance for everything. I'm not profitable enough because of compliance. Well, Are you? Okay.
Fair enough, Phil. Thanks for coming on this. Thanks for coming on this episode. We might leave it there, and we'll catch you in the next episode when we talk about change management.
Thanks, mate.
Welcome back, Jodie Douglas.
Hi, Fraser.
Thank you for joining us today. Now, we're talking about compliance and technology and innovation and all the things that efficiencies that come into this new world of compliance. Obviously, from your point of view, you're not only the business owner and advisor at Mad About Life, but you're also the responsible manager and licensee as a self-licensed planner.
Yes, that's correct. I now wear many hats, but really they're all hats that we wear anyway as an advisor. It's just a little bit more differentiated between the three.
Yeah, fair enough. It's a bit like, I guess, being the self. I related back to the self-managed super fund trustee conversation. It's still you, but it's you've got to wear the trustee hat today.
It's just a different hat, exactly.
Yep. Talk to us about your systems and processes and how that works when you're overlaying compliance.
Yeah, certainly. So when it comes to digital technology, it's about making sure that not only does it meet an efficiency requirement in terms of the client, but also the compliance side of things. So one of my points that I wrote down earlier was putting technology in place to solve a client efficiency problem is one thing, but is it going to also make our compliance efficient as well, or would it create more problems? So when we're looking at our technology, we need to actually have those two checklists around the requirements of what we need to fulfill in terms of the efficiency tool, but also the compliance tool, security measures, all of those sorts of things as well.
Yeah, it's certainly a big part of it, isn't it? Security when it comes to data. Talk to us about the data security and how much effort you've put into that.
Yeah, certainly. So really important as we have 10 different softwares, we always need to consider, okay, having these separate means we need to make sure that they all separately meet those security measures. And that can be quite tricky sometimes because each of the softwares have their own security requirements within them. One of the things that we utilize in our business is LastPass for our password security, and that is updated regularly in terms of those passwords. It's one sign-in and it stores them securely. So that's great. And ensuring that nobody has passwords saved locally on their computers and so forth. It's all within that LastPass secure mechanism. That's one of the key things. And then also, updating passwords and things like that regularly as well. We also don't have anything saved locally. Everything is saved that's client orientated within our AdvisorLogic CRM. So we don't have Dropbox or OneDrive with client information in it. It's all held securely within the document vault of AdvisorLogic, and we know that that's secure, therefore reducing any risk of breaching those security requirements, which is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, tell us about the idea of, and I know that you're across this because you catch up every month on it, but the idea around sometimes compliance can be, not thought about or not, you've put something in place and now you just trust it, it's going to go on and go forth. And you almost come to that point where you just rely on software to always going to be there and do the thing you're meant to without actually going back and checking on it regularly.
Yeah, you can't do that because everything changes all the time. And our requirements change and so does the software requirements. So really important that we're always reviewing that. I can't think of anything offhand that's happened where we've needed to change. And that's simply because of we have everything within that one CRM and we've made a really strong business decision to ensure that client information is not spread any further than within that AdvisorLogic CRM, and it's only held within those different softwares for the purpose. So, for example, Zoom meetings, we don't use the recording function within Zoom. I do voice file notes and save them within AdvisorLogic. So we just try and reduce the spread of information by just utilizing that one CRM and deleting it off other areas as required once it's in there.
Yeah, that's an interesting point too, making sure that you actually take the time to delete stuff where it's not needed.
Yes, most definitely. Even our downloads folder, we do a regular Teams update to the whole team every Friday, whereby we say, don't forget to delete your downloads file, because otherwise it can end up massive and slow everything down, but also, it's keeping things locally. So little things like that within your business to ensure that you're meeting those security requirements, not just forgetting that, computers are wonderful at actually saving things as well.
Yeah, which is part of their job. Talk to me about how the future of compliance. Do you think, obviously, as data becomes more structured and we can maybe look at key risk indicators and guardrails and things like that. Talk to me how you see maybe the future of compliance kicking on.
Definitely. Technology is evolving and we are always moving forward. And I think the world of compliance is starting to look at, okay, we need to have efficiency and we also need to have compliance. And how do we do this? I really feel that the software providers that are well placed in terms of evolving are going to manage that for us. I'm hoping that's the case. I'm hoping AdvisorLogic and Morningstar actually come out with some really great tools to be able to look at how our advisor practices like us currently doing things with all of these different apps and having it all within the one. And I think that would tick off many of our compliance requirements, particularly security and privacy, by having everything all within that one tool, which would be great for efficiency and compliance.
Yep, fantastic. Jodie, thank you so much for coming on this particular episode. We look forward to catching you in the last episode where we talk about change management.
Thanks, Fraser. Look forward to it.
Welcome back, Mitch.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. So now in this episode, we're talking about all things around compliance when it comes to technology and obviously there's a lot of work that technology can do in this space. Tell us about your experience.
So compliance for me sort of has a bit of a double meaning. Compliance both with what we want to be a really slick and very trouble-free compliant client outcome, as far as the delivery of that by technology, but also compliance as far as it pertains to the end advisor that's using it. So some of the key indicators for us that I've sort of alluded to quite heavily are controlled by the licensee. So right now for us in the evolution of our business really isn't an issue. At being guided by a large institution, we can be conscious that from a compliance point of view, we can lean on them quite heavily and utilise all of the hard work that they've done with an acute awareness as a large organisation of what that needs to look like. So we sort of really appreciate the licensee oversight. But from a compliance point of view, the use of technology for us is probably more coming to bear in the change and evolution that we're seeing in the industry around just the rigours that the advisor is having to go through in respect to maintaining their individual AR compliance in this current world. Our business, just for colour and context, has moved to a fixed-term service agreement, so a year-on-year renewable client service agreement. And around those, there is some really significant metrics that need to be met throughout the year. And we utilise our software to do that, to drive that really, really finitely throughout the business. So all of the tasks and threads and reminders that come out of the software are really quite significant. And it's not just some of the larger proprietary ones that do that. There's actually a couple of gentlemen down in Melbourne that have developed a program that in no way affiliated, but just something that we've been looking at. It's called iComply, and these guys have built a really sophisticated end-to-end compliance program where it's real paint by numbers the whole way through, and really assists in that other aspect of compliance that I'm talking about, to make sure in this current environment where we are just I don't know if it's the right way to put it, but walking on eggshells and just really tiptoeing around all of the compliance requirements that we have, and just how fraught with danger in a number of different ways, be that financially and any other aspects that may bring to bear. I see it, and we see it as really, really important to have a very effective tool to assist you to manage those really granular, required and very finite list of tasks that you have per client year in, year out. And there's some really fantastic solutions out there around it.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because obviously there's two sides to this. One is, if you relieve it to a human being to make these, to remember to do everything, something gets missed for sure. So we implement a software or a system or a process in place where we then now rely on that software and system. If for any reason the system doesn't do what it's meant to do, then often there's nobody checking.
Yeah, and I suppose that comes back to that integration piece, right? And leaning on the developer and having a really good understanding and relationship with whoever that provider is to make sure that there is some parameters and guidelines and a really good understanding. And I know that this is probably getting off compliance, but it actually helps with compliance when implementing any of these in your business. We tend to have a subject matter expert with any of the particular programs or suites of programs that we're employing, so that you do have that individual in the business that can provide the overlay or sense check at any stage to make sure that if you are wholly and solely reliant on the program to be giving the right outputs, you need to make sure that there's somebody in the business that can verify and ratify that we're giving the right inputs to get that out in the first place. So that's a very important part for us from a compliance point of view, is making sure that there's somebody really specialised in our business with that particular product suite to ensure that we're using it to its fullest extent and what we're getting out is correct to a T.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And if they need to make any minor changes, obviously most software packages allow you to make, a lot of changes internally and develop a lot of stuff internally. And so to have somebody, like you said, a subject matter expert inside your business is a great idea.
Yeah.
Talk to us about maybe the idea around with compliance or the cost of implementing software and how you see software maybe, helping with reduce some of the cost of compliance.
So we've seen a significant reduce in the cost of compliance recently, and this is out of the back of the implementation of a software suite coming out of our licensee. They've got what is, I suppose, a goals-based multi-tool calculator type program that we use that, from a compliance point of view, is almost fail-safe. It's manipulated by the client. It's then provides an output to the advisor and the client to be used in a secondary meeting. And not only does it engage the client and engage the client to the extent that we have had significant direct client feedback just about the uplift in experience that they've had in the employment of this software. But then when you look to the other side of it, both the client directly, the advisor then in the meeting verifying the data and utilising that data in their presentation, and then having automated outputs without it having been transposed across, has limited human capital time, checking, and provided that because of the way that the synergies that it has with our advice delivery software, the fact find, the modelling, and all of the things that come out of that directly flowing into Xplan has meant that we have, I suppose, increased capacity of our team and shed some of those onerous, more granular, in-the-weeds tasks that would have involved handwriting and scanning and emailing and all of those sorts of things, uploading to certain programs. They're gone now. So we can then pivot those people into producing more revenue. So by virtue of being able to do that, the cost of compliance actually potentially reduces. So I actually see that there's everything's about perspective, Fraser. It's if you look at the direct cost, you can get stuck in the weeds. If you look at the capacity that it can that it can release to allow the specialists in your business to be out there generating revenue and doing what they need to be doing, I would argue that you probably end up in a net neutral position in a lot of circumstances.
Yep, fantastic. Thanks, Mitch, for coming on and chatting to us in this episode. We look forward to catching you in the next one.
Awesome. Thanks, mate.
Welcome back, Vicky.
Welcome back, Fraser.
Thank you. Now, in this episode, we're talking a lot about compliance, which you probably don't know a lot about the financial services compliance and the regime, but I'm pretty sure you would have your own set of compliance rules.
We do. We operate under a regulator, like most industries, and many of our Agile projects have a large compliance piece to them.
Yeah, fantastic. So obviously compliance is a big part of the decision-making process when you're looking at projects or sprints. Tell us about how that comes and when that comes into the process.
Yeah, we talk a lot about the risk of not doing versus the risk of getting it right and how much time that may take. So there's a definite play in Agile around our risk tolerance, which comes into meeting compliance, but to what level. We used to probably being quite risk adverse and spending an awful lot of time ticking compliance boxes to the nth degree. So we have a quick chat about that. And then we really work on a system of making sure that that compliance approval is done early and during, rather than a card getting to the point where it could have been released to our customers other than an approval tick. So we want that running alongside the work, the compliance piece.
Yeah, fantastic. So it's about putting that compliance work in early when it's still a concept. Talk to us about that. You mentioned that some of the risk has changed from the big long tick box compliance thing. Can you go into that a bit deeper?
Yeah, like obviously even in our prioritization technique, the must-have. So there's legal and regulatory requirements that we put in our must-have. But there comes a point if we can't get all of those done, what is the risk if there's 10 check boxes and number 10's we haven't managed to make it? 9 times out of 10, supposedly, we need to get them all, but we have to actually try and use some of our Agile systems and tools to give our product owner a version of what would happen if we went to release without what we didn't manage to get to done, and that includes compliance. Yeah,
fantastic. And how do you see data and technology improving the compliance process over time?
Yeah, so I think we get we get our systems and processes really streamlined to put through small packages and easy pieces of work that we used to probably start from scratch. So templating. So we have a lot of business partners in Telstra, in our legal department, in a lot of our regulatory, in risk, who partner with the large functional heads to sort of say, these are the things I need to see because you've made quite a few mistakes in the past in this area, or they're just such a big risk for us that they're the mandatories. I have to have those. They must have through me. These ones down here, I'm going to let you have a play. I'm going to let you roll with those, and we're going to evaluate how you went at the end of our sprint review.
Fantastic. And sometimes, obviously, there's a short history of compliance within financial advice. There's often rules made to protect consumers, which is great, and then there's an interpretation that comes in after that, and there's often different and weird and varying interpretations. How do you guys get around that? I guess do you have to? I guess whether it's just one company, it's easier to just say, no, this is our interpretation. We're just going to have to build this.
Mm-hmm. I guess there's a compliance maturity, so you would know various people who can interpret those things with less risk of getting it wrong, as opposed to myself probably jumping straight in and deciding that I know whether a tech piece has met our compliance. But those people are rare, so they can't be across every mission at the same time. So again, it's that risk-based approach, but just calling out early, I guess, and learning from our mistakes is probably the most important piece. Our documentation is pretty clear to say how we interpret it and the path we went down. It's more about how we deal with it if that interpretation or path wasn't ideal, and that's fast, honest, and straightforward.
Yeah, fantastic. And how do you see the future panning out when it comes to technology being able to help people comply easier?
Yeah, so I definitely think it's a big part of it, but obviously data integrity and security. We don't want the manipulation of any of that to make compliance, sort of an easy way round. So yeah, I think it's going to be security of all our platforms will be the number one piece.
Fantastic. Thank you, Vicky. We look forward to catching you in the next episode.
Thank you, Fraser.
Welcome back, Ivon.
Thanks, Fraser.
Fantastic to have you here. Now, we're talking all things compliance from different aspects and points of view. It's obviously a huge part of everything that you do in your role. We've got different levels of compliance. It seems to take up a huge amount of people's time in the advice industry especially. Tell us about how important it is with you.
It is important. There's no doubt. compliance is a sort of necessary part of business, right? And the challenge for us is to try to find a way to make compliance efficient without undermining the kind of basis behind why regulations have been put in place. So I think, for instance, you often see regulations come up that drive changes to the way we do things, and the purpose of them is to change behaviours, to make sure that we do adapt and we don't take shortcuts and undertake due diligence. So from a technology perspective, we need to facilitate that change of behaviour rather than shortcutting it, rather than automating it. And so I think from a user perspective, we often find that there's a change in some kind of compliance, and our users will hope for no impact on efficiency or no impact on process. And we have to work with them to help them sort of understand that we all have to tweak a process. We'll have to change something because we need to send them down a slightly different path so that they can adhere to new changes coming through. Exactly.
And I love the idea of leaning into this as, from software, from an advisor point of view, from, just be able to say, great, how can we implement things in a process or a system that help us, be compliant, that provide us with a greater level of compliance. I love the concept of, the key risk indicators, for example, or the guide rails, and that financial planning software, if we've got structured data, can then start looking at putting guardrails in place to say, if this, then that, having some ideas that say, if this particular type of client's getting this particular type of product, maybe that might sit with a standard deviation outside of the normal or whatever it might be. Tell us about where that's up to.
Well, I love data, right? We talked about my sort of fascination with what we can do with the information that we're putting into the system. The opportunities I see for data are to raise flags in real time for users. In times past, when you don't have the power of data to support analysis, you restrict users from doing things, and that can really slow things down where there's a situation outside of the norm. So if, for instance, you sort of said, here's your approved product list, you can't recommend anything that's not on that APL. Now, there's valid circumstances where you will want to recommend something that's not on an APL. If a system is too restrictive, all of a sudden you've really slowed the user down and stopped them from moving any further. On the other hand, if there's nothing to flag it for them, then you can have people with the very best intentions making, they could be negligent errors, or they could just be sort of misinterpreting some policy information that the licensee's released or that they're trying to work by. So having these flags in place, being able to understand what people are doing, and then sort of say, you've just gone outside that flag. You've just recommended a product that's not on the APL. Just drop a file note in, right? And you get a message, you pop a file note in, and that can then you can continue on with the advice. And that paper trail, which I think is the key for compliance, being able to sort of tell that story around how you've gone from A to B and recommended a certain strategy for clients, that's in place. If you dovetail that into the whole compliance and risk management framework for a licensee, then you can start to sort of show them, these are the flags that have come up, and these are how people have addressed them, and they might be able to review those responses, address anything that is inappropriate, but also look at the way that they are communicating their policies and their guidelines to users so that they can reinforce some of the things that people might be getting wrong. And I feel that's a really sort of positive and proactive way of helping people understand the boundaries they're working in, and at the same time not slowing them down from their process.
Yeah, 100% agree. That concept of being able to still do stuff, but be able to create that. Why did you do it that way? Messaging along the way. Really, the ultimate here would be to not have to worry about all the remediation stuff that took place over many years, because the software is flagging things along the way, that whatever it might be. And as you said, there's also the oversight type conversations when it comes to it's kind of like a little bit of an oversight from the software, but then it might flag a human conversation.
It kind of, I totally agree, and I think it's what approach are we going to take to managing compliance? Are we going to focus on the fact that people are inherently bad and we need to stop them from doing bad things, or are we going to acknowledge that people are good and they sometimes make mistakes? And I think if you take the latter approach, then you can really support the advice process without slowing it down and help it continue to improve.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I love what you said before about the paper trail, the data trail, isn't it? It's sort of the data. The data will tell the story. The data will provide the proof of what happened and when it happened. And that's the beauty of using a system rather than just relying on somebody's word necessarily. Tell us about security. Security is sort of a big thing for a lot of people, just making sure that, the old days of locking the filing cabinet was locking inside a locked office. And some people then, even from a client point of view, we always worry about where we're putting our data.
We absolutely do, and I'm sure a lot of advisors would have experiences of clients who are very, very protective of their data and want to make sure that it's tightly controlled. And of course, in Australia, we have very, very tight privacy laws and all sorts of regulation around what you can do and how you can use data and how you need to protect it. It's something that sitting inside a technology business, we are always undertaking ongoing information security training, lots of tests, lots of audits, lots of reviews of processes, and that is designed for the greater good to protect people's data. We do, of course, have some really rigorous processes around what happens if there's a data breach and how do we go about reporting, rectifying, and removing the risk of that happening again. Ironically, though, we're doing a lot of work at the sort of back end of this process, and then at the front end of the process, there's plenty of advisors who aren't necessarily taking that same level of protection. They've got a license to an application, and an external paraplanner uses that license to jump in and do some paraplanning work or something like that. So it's something that I think we need to be mindful of throughout the industry. And it's got to work all the way through the process where we are aware of the data people are sharing with us and the consequences of it getting picked up or shown to other people.
Yeah, the shared login thing's interesting, isn't it? Because it's sort of it's tempting, but it's also a massive risk.
It's like every risk. You don't necessarily see it as important until all of a sudden it really is. And more and more we're seeing evidence of phishing activity that captures people's data and might be isolated to a single incident, or may end up sort of picking up passwords and getting into applications or email systems or something like that. And once that happens, those cases where people have their Dropbox usage locked and they can't access it, the ransomware stuff, it's really frightening, and it really has an impact on a business. So this is something that I think everyone really needs to be aware of, and at a sort of individual business level, reinforcing that protection of data and sensible use of, it sounds a bit boring, right, but sensible use of technology so that you're not exposing your client's information to any of these risks.
Yeah, it certainly is a worry for some clients, but I think you're absolutely right. For advisors to be taking it a bit fairly seriously is a must. Talk to us about the concept of the cost of compliance versus the whole idea that we're talking about today is around efficiency. How should people be treating the cost involved with being compliant?
I feel one of the biggest inefficiencies with compliance is that sort of lack of clarity around what the rules are. So I would say one of the best ways to address the cost of compliance is to really be sure about what you need to do, because I feel like when you talk to various people throughout the industry, they interpret regulation and compliance and then add on a little bit of extra to be on the safe side. And as that filters down and down and down, all of a sudden, that little bit extra that's added on at every step of the process can become quite time consuming and can become a real cost within a practice. So understanding what you can do and understanding the difference between this is what I need to do to be compliant, and then this is what I want to do to add a great customer experience. And that's totally valid. But, if an SOA is taking you, 10 hours to write from start to finish, how much of that is compliance and how much of that is value add? And how can you start to try to reduce the time that you're spending without impacting the client experience throughout that, and while obviously maintaining your diligent approach to compliance?
Yeah, that what you're saying gets me a little bit wound up with all the different versions of SOAs and the different versions of the interpretations. It's certainly frustrating from every point of view. I think it's probably very frustrating from a software technology point of view, trying to build something when there's so many different ideas of the rules.
Yeah, and I mean a really good approach to sort of working through that is to talk to your provider around, what do they recommend you do to solve a problem? Because they're building features and processes and functionality to solve the same problem that you're trying to solve. But some people will fall into the trap of approaching that challenge with, here's what I do. How can the technology make that work? Right? So this is a square peg going into a round hole, as opposed to saying, this is what the technology wants me to do. How can I adapt and adopt that? So I can still provide a great client experience. I can still be efficient, but I'm kind of leveraging the best practice approach to the tech. Over the long term, that kind of solution is really going to pay off. That these days we tend to configure technology more than customize it. Many years ago we would take a piece of tech and we would say, how can we bend this so that it works for my processes? And nowadays you want to configure, you want to understand how it works and then try and tweak that configuration, because as the software evolves and we keep building on it, that's the path it's going to take. Maintaining the customized version of something can really become costly and create risks down the track.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So a little bit of flexibility is required from the advisor's point of view and maybe the licensee's point of view. Now, if we had a blank sheet of paper, we could create some future ideas around what compliance or technology could look like. Where would we go?
My answer is always going to come back to data, Fraser. That is where we can really leverage what's going on in the system. We can report on how people are using the technology. We can raise those flags. We can analyze it, and we can proactively make sure that people are working in the client's best interests. And I think as we're doing that, as you encourage people to kind of follow that process and keep the data in the system, the more data we have, the better we can service clients, the better we can analyze our businesses and start to understand that, these are the clients who are generating the most revenue for us. These are clients who we're spending a lot of time on, but not necessarily generating enough revenue to cover our costs. How can we improve our business? Where are we finding efficiencies? And then how can we service clients better? And I think that I love the idea of being able to use what information is in the database to identify opportunities for clients. Anyone who has a client coming into the office will either sit down or will get a support staff member to sit down and go through that client file and sort of say, well, how are we going? What can we do? Where should we be directing this client towards? We could do that in real time. That's for me the big opportunity across the industry.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's not just about identifying opportunities, but also about identifying those risks if you think something's coming up, and whether it be you see clients going on there's a notice that comes in saying clients have been on a spending spree for the last 3 months, might need a conversation through to or they've cancelled something or not paid for something, and the plan is now coming out of whack. So I think there's plenty of opportunity in that space as the software builds out. And as you said, I think the key to that is getting as much structured data in there as we can.
Agree.
Ivon, thanks for catching up in this episode. Let's catch up again very shortly when we talk about change management.
Sounds good. Thanks, Fraser.